Oda Nobunaga conquered half of Japan by force. Toyotomi Hideyoshi rose from peasant origins to rule the country. But the political order that defined Japan for the next 2.5 centuries came from a different man. The man who outlasted both of them, and built a regime that endured for more than 260 years, was Tokugawa Ieyasu. His story is not mainly about spectacle or flashes of battlefield genius. It is about patience, discipline, and timing. Tokugawa Ieyasu was born in 1543, into a Japan that had been tearing itself apart for nearly a century. He died in 1616, as the undisputed ruler of a unified country, the founder of a military government, a shogunate, that would govern Japan for the next 265 years. Between those two dates, a childhood spent in captivity, decades of serving men more powerful than himself, one moment of submission that could have ended everything, and one battle that decided it all. This is the file on Tokugawa Ieyasu. To understand Tokugawa Ieyasu, you have to understand the world he was born into. Japan in the 16th century was not a unified country. It was a patchwork of competing territories, each controlled by a regional warlord, a daimyo, with his own army, his own alliances, and his own ambitions. The emperor still existed. He still held a place of deep cultural and symbolic importance. But he had no army, no treasury, and no real political power. The men who held actual power were the daimyo, and they were at war with each other. This era is known as the Sengo period. The name means, roughly, warring states. It had been going on, in one form or another, since the mid-1400s. By the time Ieyasu was born, it had already lasted nearly 100 years. Into this world, in a small domain called Mikawa, in what is now central Japan, a boy was born to a minor lord. Mikawa was not a great power. It was a small territory, squeezed between two much larger and more dangerous neighbors. To the east, the powerful Imagawa clan. To the west, the rising Oda clan. For a minor lord in Mikawa, there was no safe direction to look. And from the very beginning of his life, Tokugawa Ieyasu knew exactly what that felt like. Ieyasu was about 4 years old when his father sent him away as a hostage. This was not unusual for the time. In the Sengo period, minor lords often gave their children to stronger neighbors as guarantees of loyalty. If you broke an alliance, your child paid the price. Ieyasu was sent first toward the Oda clan in the west. He never arrived. He was intercepted, and ended up instead in the hands of the Imagawa, the powerful clan to the east. He would spend the next several years in their territory, under their control, separated from his family and his home. His father died while he was still in captivity. Ieyasu inherited a domain he could not return to. He was a child lord of a territory he had never governed, held by a clan that had no reason to let him go. Later tradition would describe these years as the crucible that shaped him, the place where he learned to observe rather than act, to absorb rather than resist, to wait for conditions to change rather than fight against conditions he could not change. Whether he understood it in those terms at the time, we cannot say. What we can say is this: the man who emerged from those years was one of the most patient political operators in Japanese history. And that was not an accident. By the early 1560s, Ieyasu was back in Mikawa. The Imagawa clan, his former captors, had been decisively defeated at the Battle of Okehazama in 1560, a stunning upset by a general named Oda Nobunaga, who had attacked with a smaller force and won. With the Imagawa's power broken, Ieyasu was free. He returned to his domain, consolidated his position, and made a decision that would define the next 20 years of his life. He allied with Oda Nobunaga. This was not an obvious choice. Nobunaga was dangerous, unpredictable, and had no particular reason to treat Ieyasu as an equal. But Ieyasu understood something clearly: Nobunaga was going to win. And it was better to be useful to a winner than to be destroyed by one. The alliance held for more than 20 years. While Nobunaga pushed westward, conquering territory, breaking enemies, dismantling the old order of Japan with a ruthlessness that shocked even his allies. Ieyasu held the East. He fought his own wars, expanded his own domain, and kept his flank secure. He was a loyal, capable, and consistently reliable partner. He was also careful, always, never to position himself as a rival. Never to accumulate so much power or prestige that Nobunaga would feel threatened. Whether that restraint was genuine respect or calculated survival is a question historians still debate. Probably it was both. What is not in question is the outcome. Ieyasu grew stronger every year of the alliance, and Nobunaga never moved against him. Then, in June of 1582, Nobunaga was assassinated. One of his own generals turned against him. Nobunaga was surrounded at a temple called Honnoji in Kyoto and died there, by his own hand, it is believed, rather than be captured. Ieyasu was in the region when it happened. He had no army with him. He made a rapid, dangerous journey back to his own territory. He survived. And then he watched to see who would move first. The man who moved fastest was Toyotomi Hideyoshi. Hideyoshi had been one of Nobunaga's most capable generals, a man of extraordinary energy and political instinct who had risen from genuinely humble origins to the highest levels of military command. Within days of Nobunaga's death, he had tracked down the assassin, defeated him, and begun positioning himself as Nobunaga's avenger and natural successor. Ieyasu was not prepared to accept that. In 1584, the two men's forces clashed at the battles of Komaki and Nagakute, a campaign in which Ieyasu's forces performed well in the field, inflicting a significant defeat on part of Hideyoshi's army. But Hideyoshi had resources, reach, and allies that Ieyasu could not match. The military contest stalled. It became a negotiation. And here is the moment that defines Tokugawa Ieyasu more than any other. Ieyasu had beaten Hideyoshi's army in the field. He had standing. He had leverage. He could have continued the fight. He chose not to. In 1586, Ieyasu traveled to Kyoto and formally submitted to Toyotomi Hideyoshi, acknowledging him as the supreme authority in Japan, accepting a subordinate position in a political order he had not chosen. This was not weakness. It was a calculation made with complete clarity. Hideyoshi was too strong to destroy. The cost of trying would have been too high. Submitting now, or surviving, maintaining his domain, preserving his army, was worth more than any short-term point of pride. But Ieyasu did not submit and then stop. He submitted, and then he waited. He watched Hideyoshi's government carefully. He observed the alliances, the loyalties, the fault lines. He kept his own domain intact. He did nothing that would make Hideyoshi feel threatened. And he waited for conditions to change. For a few more years after his submission, Ieyasu remained in place. Then, in 1590, after Hideyoshi's decisive campaign against the Hojo clan in eastern Japan, everything changed. Ieyasu was ordered to give up his established lands in Mikawa and move east into the Kanto region, a vast but less developed territory far from the political center of the country. The move was likely intended to separate Ieyasu from his base of support and reduce his influence. Ieyasu went east. The territory he received included a settlement on a bay, a place called Edo. Today, you know it as Tokyo. He began transforming it. He managed water, built infrastructure, brought in settlers, and developed the land into the political center of what would become Tokugawa Japan. Whatever Hideyoshi's intentions, Ieyasu spent those years building. Meanwhile, Hideyoshi launched two invasions of Korea, in 1592 and again in 1597. Both campaigns were costly, and both ultimately failed. They drained resources and strained alliances across the country. Hideyoshi died in 1598. His heir, a young child named Hideyori, was left in the care of a council of the most powerful lords in Japan, including Ieyasu. Hideyoshi had extracted promises. Protect my son. Honor my legacy. Keep the peace. Before the year was out, Ieyasu was arranging marriages between his family and the families of other daimyo, building alliances, calling in loyalties, drawing lines across the political map of Japan. His rivals saw it clearly. Those loyal to the Toyotomi cause, led by a capable administrator named Ishida Mitsunari, began to consolidate against him. The collision was coming. Ieyasu had been waiting for it. On the 21st of October, 1600, two coalitions of Japanese warlords took the field on a mountain plain in central Japan called Sekigahara. To the east, Ieyasu's forces and his allies. To the west, the coalition loyal to the Toyotomi heir, led by Ishida Mitsunari. The numbers were roughly equal, somewhere in the range of 170,000 soldiers in total. On paper, it was close. In practice, Ieyasu had spent months ensuring it was not. He had been negotiating in private for longer than that, securing commitments from daimyo on the western side, arranging defections, mapping loyalties. The battle, when it came, was the last move in a process he had been engineering for years. It was over in hours. Key Western commanders failed to commit their forces, or switched sides mid-battle. Mitsunari's coalition collapsed. By the end of the day, Ieyasu had effectively won the struggle for national dominance. What followed was consolidation, the redistribution of land, the reduction of his rival's power, and, in 1603, his formal appointment by the emperor as Shogun, the title that had historically designated Japan's supreme military ruler. He held the position for 2 years. Then he did something deliberate and significant: he passed the title to his son. The message was unmistakable. The shogunate belongs to the Tokugawa family. It is not a prize to be won. It is a dynasty. No one would take it from them for 265 years. Tokugawa Ieyasu lived until 1616. He was 73 years old. In the final years of his life, he removed the last obstacle to Tokugawa dominance, Hideyoshi's son, Hideyori, who had survived and remained a symbolic rallying point for those who still believed in the Toyotomi cause. In 1614 and 1615, Ieyasu besieged Osaka Castle, where Hideyori had consolidated his supporters. The castle fell. Hideyori died. This is the part of Ieyasu's story that does not simplify cleanly. He had sworn to protect Hideyoshi's heir. He destroyed him. The man who built his reputation on patience and political discipline ended his life by eliminating a threat that was partly symbolic, and a person who, by any reasonable account, he had promised to protect. History does not always offer clean conclusions. The Tokugawa order that followed, built on foundations Ieyasu laid and his successors expanded, was designed to keep any daimyo from becoming powerful enough to challenge the regime. It was a system of stability, enforced through control, that lasted for more than 2.5 centuries. That order endured until 1868, when it was dismantled in the Meiji Restoration, a revolution that transformed Japan into a modern nation-state. The world the reformers were dismantling was, in its foundations, the world Tokugawa Ieyasu built. 3 men defined an era. Nobunaga lit the fire. Hideyoshi stoked it. Tokugawa Ieyasu waited for it to burn down, and then built Japan in the ashes. He was not the most brilliant general of his age. He was not the most charismatic, or the most bold, or the most beloved. He was the one still standing at the end. And in the most violent century in Japanese history, that turned out to be enough. That's the file on Tokugawa Ieyasu.